Good evening, peoples, and welcome back to my living room with me and Gingersnap here, who I just woke up, startled you awake, for our Tuesday evening Bible study. So last week we started a new series on the 7 deadly sins because it is Lent and why not? In the before times, we had just started a study of Glittering Vices by Rebecca Conondike DeYoung, talking about the 7 classic deadly sins. I'm going to move my lipstick so I don't knock it over, and how they are kind of archetypes of a whole lot of different kinds of sin. So not that they are the only kinds, but they are kind of the big headings under which a lot of other things fall. So last week we talked about avarice, which we defined as selfish greed, and its opposite is charitable love. So there are 7 sins, but they each have their opposites. So there are 7 virtues that oppose the vices. So the vices, and we're going alphabetically because I like to have things in order. So the vices are avarice, envy, gluttony, lust, sloth, and wrath. But then the virtues, but you were perfectly content on the electric blanket until we went live. Okay, fine. But humility is the foil of vainglory. Kindness is the opposite of envy. Diligence counters sloth. Charitable love is the opposite of avarice. Patience versus wrath. Chastity versus love. Lust. Chastity versus lust. That was a lot of misspeaking in one phrase. And temperance versus gluttony. So tonight we're looking at envy, which is perhaps the most innocuous of the sins, I would say. Words mean things, and it's always important to be clear what exactly it is that we're talking about. And really, you were fast asleep for like half an hour until, okay, fine. It's always good to be clear about what it is that we're talking about. So there's envy and jealousy are often used interchangeably in modern English, which, I mean, you can do that if you want to. Language changes, much as it frustrates me because I like it when there are standards. But when we're talking about envy, we mean you're envious of a concept or a quality that someone else has, but you don't. And your lack of having that makes you resentful. So envy is feeling sadness at somebody else's good or feeling good about somebody else's misfortune. Aristotle defined envy as pain at the sight of another's good fortune, stirred by those who have what we ought to have. But this is distinct from jealousy, which is you do have something, but you don't want anyone else to have it. So you're being very possessive of it. You're keeping it away from someone else. So we talk about jealous husbands with attractive wives or whatever, or dragons who are jealously guarding their hoards. So that's, I guess, thematically similar, but that's not quite what we're talking about when you talk about envy. And of course, there's also coveting, as in thou shalt not. So one is covetous over a specific physical thing that belongs to somebody else that you might want to take. So like in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, like everybody is covetous of the One Ring except for Faramir. Faramir is awesome. Faramir is absolute legend. Okay, so yeah, that was a very nerdy example of using covetous in a sentence, I am aware. So envy is also different from being inspired by someone and seeking to be like them. I've definitely had a few pastors or professors that I've said I want to be like them when I grow up. So that's not necessarily something that breeds resentment or a bad feeling. That's kind of a hashtag goals. I'm being very millennial here. Something that I want to live up to more as an inspiration rather than a source of discontent within myself. So last week we talked about avarice, selfish greed. So how is envy different? They are kind of similar. It's wanting something. So avarice, selfish greed, is wanting, for example, money for the sake of having a whole honk load of money, or having the biggest yard, or the most collectible teacups, I don't know, for the sake of that. Whereas envy is resenting that somebody else has the bigger yard, and that just kind of builds up inside you and eats at your bones, I think someone was saying that I was reading this week. Forget who. Anyway, this chapter on envy opens with a line that was quite good. Of all the deadly sins, only envy is no fun at all. Yep. The title of this chapter is Envy, Feeling Bitter When Others Have It Better, which I think also sums it up well. You can, it can be fun to be greedy and collect a hoard of something. I'm really going with the dragon images tonight. I really am a nerd. You probably, if you didn't already know this, I don't know what to tell you. Gluttony can be fun, and being selfish in other ways, that can be fun, whereas envy doesn't feel good. It just doesn't. It just eats away at you and kind of builds on itself and grows until you resent everyone around you, because why should they have the thing? I should have the thing. I deserve to have the thing. Why do they even have the thing? They don't deserve it. It should be mine. It's not fun. But like I said, it's very innocuous. So I wanted to read from Psalm 73, which is a psalm kind of about envy. Truly God is good to Israel, to those who are pure in heart. But as for me, my feet had nearly slipped. I had almost tripped and fallen, because I envied the proud and saw the prosperity of the wicked. For their entire lives seem free of pain, and they have their fill to eat. In the misfortunes of others they have no share. They are not afflicted as others are. Therefore they wear their pride like a necklace, and wrap their violence about them like a cloak. I love that imagery. And apparently in the Hebrew, necklace is a verb, so it necklaces them, which is I love verbing nouns, but verbing nouns is in itself verbing a noun. Anyway, so Hebrew has necklaces as a verb, which is great imagery. Skipping a few verses. When I tried to understand these things, it was too hard for me, until I entered God's sanctuary and discerned the end of the wicked. Surely you set them in slippery places. You cast them down in ruin. Oh, how suddenly do they come to destruction, come to an end and perish from terror. Like a dream when one awakens, O Lord. When you arise, you will make their image vanish. When my mind became embittered, I was sorely wounded in my heart. I was stupid and had no understanding. I was like a brute beast in your presence. Yet I am always with you. You hold me by my right hand. You will guide me by your counsel, and afterwards receive me with glory. Whom have I in heaven but you? And having you, I desire nothing upon earth. Though my flesh and my heart should waste away, God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. Truly those who forsake you will perish. You destroy all who are unfaithful. But it is good for me to be near God. I have made you my refuge, Lord God, to tell of all your works. This is the word of the Lord. So the psalmist opens with some anger of, why do they have the nice things? Why don't bad things happen to them? They are jerk. Oh, I think there was one other line that I'd skipped over. What was it? Was I imagining that? Yeah, in vain have I kept my heart clean and washed my hands in innocence. Yeah, that's also a very good illustration of envy. Like, why am I bothering to be nice to people if it doesn't pay off? Because this may come as a complete and utter shock to you all, but life isn't fair, and that can be immensely frustrating. Because it's not. There are people who are jerks but have nice things and don't even appreciate it. And that's immensely frustrating. And so the psalmist is kind of angry and embittered by this. But then as the psalm comes to an end, he turns his eyes to God instead, which is a bit more healthy. Because envy can really just eat you away. So there are a whole lot of a whole lot of examples of envy that we can see in the world around us. And I think that envy is probably a sin that we could more easily see in ourselves than something like greed, probably, because it's really innocuous. So Thomas Aquinas, are you coming back up? Come here. Oh, well, okay. We have opinions tonight, excuse me. Thomas Aquinas is a pretty big name in Catholic theology, especially. Even has a dorm named after him in my college. So he wrote that envy can undermine our love for our neighbors, which, yeah, that really, I think quite hits it well, because if we are envious, that kind of builds in resentment, and the more we think about how come they have the thing and I don't have the thing, the more we kind of work ourselves into a kind of angry, resentful frenzy, and it then becomes harder to love your neighbor if you've really gotten focused on they don't deserve the nice thing, I should have it. So there are specific immoral actions, or I guess sins that could fall under the category of this sin. I'm going with immoral actions so as not to use sin a bunch of times in the same sentence. So that might be like Schadenfreude is a great German word that I think roots from others' harm and joy. So self-satisfaction in something unfortunate happening to someone you don't like, or who deserves it, or who's a bad person. There was definitely some Schadenfreude when I was in, I think, 6th or 7th grade, and there was one guy in my PE class who was just total jerk to everybody. I'm sure he had his issues. And then one day, because it was the fashion at the time for men to wear their jeans very low, his pants fell down in PE class, and there was some Schadenfreude that day. I might say that the majority of reality TV is based in the concept of envy, and if we didn't feel envious, a lot of reality TV probably would not be selling as many commercials as it does. That's a little bit judgy of me, especially since I stand on the morally elite soapbox of I don't actually have a TV, so being judgy, and I should be less judgy in Lent. But also resentment in general, and a lot of insults and angry writings, I think, are kind of based in envy. So why is envy such a deadly sin? Is it really that bad? Yes. My answer would be yes, for sure. We want gin scritches, okay. Yes, because it's not even fun, and it can really destroy your relationships with other people. And it's a lot healthier to focus on what you do have rather than what you don't. Although, I mean, having goals and working towards things are good. But being angry that somebody else has something, that's bad. So how can we defeat envy with kindness? I'm not really sure that I have an answer to that question, but kindness is the opposite of envy in this classical system. So there's a whole ethical debate on the motivations of good actions. Are you performing a good action for the sake of it, or because you want to be seen as being a good person? I don't know. But doing kind things is a good place to start, regardless of your motivation. If you want to get something out of it, or if you actually want to be kind, you might as well do kind things, even if you have selfish motivations for doing that. So, gosh, she was very fidgety right now. This is okay. So anyway, it is Lent, and in the season of Lent, people often fast or give something up for the season or take on a spiritual practice. I think that Lent is as good a time of any to be reminded that we are all very sinful people, totally depraved, John Calvin would say, because that isn't really something that we want to think about or talk about, especially as Presbyterians. We are not in a tradition where we go to confession regularly, for example, and it's just uncomfortable to think about how we are not good people. And I would like to think that most people are mostly good most of the time, but that doesn't mean that we don't still have places where we can improve. So I thought that reflecting on the 7 bigger categories of sin in the season might help as a kind of starting point to think about what sins we might be guilty of that fall under those headings, and maybe how we could break those cycles. Because our Lenten theme is again and again, and those cycles of sins, they just keep on going unless we can break them. So I hope that you are having a thoughtful and introspective Lenten season. If you have pets, I hope that they are being less needy. And I hope to see you tomorrow.